Welcome back to the sanctuary of the untold, anything you want. In the glittering, chaotic, and often cruel theater of the entertainment industry, we are accustomed to scripts. We are used to prepared statements, carefully curated Instagram captions, and publicists who intervene before a star can utter a single word of unvarnished truth. We watch the red carpets, and we see the masks. The smiles that don't reach the eyes, the rehearsed laughter, the poses designed to project a perfection that does not exist. But every once in a rare while, the mask slips. The script is burned. And what we are left with is a moment of such raw, visceral humanity that it silences the flashbulbs and forces the entire world to hold its breath. Last night, we witnessed one of those moments. The world of celebrity news, usually a cacophony of trivial gossip, was brought to a standstill by a confession that felt less like a headline and more like an open wound. The evening began as they always do, with lights, elegance, and the hum of polite conversation. But it ended with a revelation that has rewritten the history of one of Turkey's most debated duos, Demet Özdemir and Yaman. For years, their story has been told in whispers, in rumors, and in the spaces between unfinished sentences. But last night, under the glare of cameras she could no longer hide from, Demet Özdemir shattered the silence. She spoke not with the polished veneer of a superstar, but with the trembling voice of a woman who has reached her breaking point. She spoke of a love that didn't explode, but faded, a connection that didn't break, but eroded. And she delivered a verdict that will echo in the corridors of this industry for years to come. After what Yaman did to me and put me through, he lost me and my love. Before we step into the wreckage of that evening and analyze the devastating psychology behind her words, I must ask for your unwavering alliance. To ensure that we continue to bring you these deep, respectful, and analytical dives into the lives of the stars you admire, please verify that you are subscribed to anything you want. And for those among you who wish to be the true patrons of this channel, the guardians of detailed storytelling, I invite you to click the join button below. Your support is the gravity that holds this universe together. Now, lower the lights and prepare your hearts. We are about to explore the anatomy of a goodbye. The setting was deceptive in its glamour. It was a private event, the kind populated by the elite of the industry, where the champagne flows and the secrets are usually kept safely behind velvet ropes. Demet Özdemir arrived as the image of success, poised, beautiful, the very definition of a leading lady. But as the night wore on, the facade began to crack under the weight of an unseen burden. When she exited the venue, confronted by a wall of reporters and the blinding staccato of camera flashes, something fundamental shifted. She did not offer the standard no comment. She did not smile and wave. Instead, she stopped. And in that pause, the strong, controlled image we have curated in our minds was replaced by the silhouette of a woman who was fragile, exhausted, yet incredibly determined to own her truth. I realized I could no longer remain silent, she began. The witnesses present, hardened journalists who have seen it all, agreed that this was not a planned press release. There was no strategy here, no crisis management team whispering in her ear. This was an emotional outburst that had been suppressed for months, perhaps years, finally clawing its way to the surface. Her voice trembled, carrying the gravitational weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Tears, unbidden and unchecked, marked the transition from celebrity to human. It was the moment the industry realized that the rumors were not just stories, they were scars. Demet Özdemir did not resort to the clichés of a breakup. She did not speak of incompatibility or growing apart. Instead, she offered a poetic and devastating description of what had occurred between her and Yaman. This was the slow death of a love, she declared. This phrase, slow death, is haunting. It implies a process of decay, a gradual suffocation of affection rather than a sudden execution. It suggests that while the world was busy speculating about dramatic betrayals or explosive arguments, the reality was much quieter and much more painful. Everyone was talking about betrayal, arguments, other people. But no one wanted to see what was going on inside me, she said, expressing a profound loneliness that had gone unnoticed by the masses. This admission sheds light on the isolation of fame, the feeling of screaming behind glass while the world applauds the performance. She emphasized that her relationship with Can was never simply romantic. It was foundational. We weren't just lovers, he was someone with whom I felt I spoke the same language, who looked in the same direction. This retrospective acknowledgement of their bond makes the current estrangement even more tragic. To lose a lover is one thing. To lose the one person who speaks your language is to be left in a foreign land without a map. The tragedy lies not in the conflict, but in the transformation of that deep connection into a wasteland of uncertainty. If the slow death was the crime, then silence was the weapon. Throughout her confession, Demet returned repeatedly to the concept of uncertainty. If someone loves you, they won't leave you alone with uncertainty, she stated, a line that cut through the noise of the night like a knife. This was her most direct indictment of Yaman's behavior. She painted a picture of a relationship where communication had broken down, replaced by a cold, impenetrable wall. Demet described a dynamic where she was left waiting for an explanation, waiting for reassurance, waiting for a sign of life from the man she loved. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I simply waited. But sometimes waiting is the biggest mistake, she confessed. This realization is the bitter fruit of her experience. It speaks to the agony of the partner who stays, hoping that patience will be rewarded, only to realize that their patience was being used against them. The silence she described was not peaceful, it was active. It was a refusal to engage, a refusal to validate her feelings, and ultimately, a refusal to fight for the relationship. In her eyes, Yaman didn't just stop loving her, he stopped seeing her. We have all faced the cruelty of silence in our lives. The unreturned text, the cold shoulder, the partner who simply checks out while you are still trying to fix things. I want to turn the floor over to you, the Anything You Want community. Do you agree with Demet that leaving someone in uncertainty is a form of betrayal? Is silence sometimes worse than shouting? I want to read your stories and your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, hitting the like button helps us continue to bring you these nuanced, human-centric stories. For those who want to support our detailed analysis directly, the join button awaits. The most shocking statement of the night, the headline that will define this saga, was her final verdict. After what Can did to me and put me through, he lost me and my love. This was not a conditional statement. It was an epitaph. But Demet was careful to explain that this conclusion was not reached in a moment of haste. People don't give up suddenly, she explained, outlining the excruciating chronology of heartbreak. First they try to understand, then they remain silent, then they give up. And finally, they surrender. These words serve as a summary of her inner journey over the past few months. She revealed that she had tried, repeatedly, to talk, to confront, and to resolve the issues. She had knocked on the door of his heart over and over again, only to find it bolted shut. The surrender she speaks of is not an act of weakness, but an act of survival. It is the moment when you realize that fighting for the relationship is destroying you, and the only way to save yourself is to let go. The surrender is the acceptance that the person you loved no longer exists, or perhaps, never existed in the way you thought they did. When the inevitable question of forgiveness arose, Demet Özdemir displayed a maturity that belied her tears. I'm not a vengeful person, she declared. She framed forgiveness not as a gift to Yaman, but as a necessity for her own soul, a way to release the poison of resentment. However, she drew a sharp, unbreakable line between forgiveness and reconciliation. There are things that break and are never the same again, she said. With these words, she almost completely closed the door on the possibility of a reunion. She didn't need to shout no to the reporter's questions about getting back together. Her facial expression, her tone of voice, and the utter finality of her demeanor conveyed the message loud and clear. She was telling the world that while she might forgive the arsonist, she would not live in the burned-down house. The trust, once the bedrock of their shared language, had been pulverized, and some things, once broken, cannot be glued back together. Following these cataclysmic statements, the entire industry pivoted to look at Yaman. The expectation was a reaction, a denial, an apology, a defense. Instead, there was nothing. The famous actor remained silent for a long time, and continues to remain silent as we speak. This silence has become a Rorschach test for the celebrity circles. Some interpret it as shock, a man stunned into muteness by the raw honesty of his ex-partner. Others argue it is a deliberate PR strategy, a calculated move to let the storm blow over without adding fuel to the fire. However, in the context of Demet's specific complaints about uncertainty and silence, Can's lack of response feels like a confirmation of her accusations. It reinforces the very behavior she cited as the cause of the breakup. By saying nothing, he is, in effect, saying everything. The silence that surrounds him now is not dignified, it is heavy. It suggests a man who either cannot face the reality of what he has lost, or one who simply does not care enough to respond. Either option is a tragedy in its own right. The story did not end when Demet wiped her tears and entered her car. The real storm erupted in the hours that followed. By midnight, the gossip in Istanbul was boiling over. Whispers from the inner circle suggest that this was not just a spontaneous statement, but the final act of a long-simmering reckoning. Sources close to Demet reveal that this was the result of an internal conflict that had been brewing for weeks, even months. Allegedly, Demet had been the protector of the relationship's image for a long time. She had backtracked on previous frustrations, chosen to remain silent when rumors flared, and publicly displayed a supportive attitude toward Can in a desperate attempt to save what they had. She was holding up the sky while it was falling. But each act of protection, met with a cold wall from Can's side, only deepened her disappointment. The confession we saw last night was the moment the dam finally broke. It was the definitive breakup that had happened in private long before it happened in public. Amidst the pain, there was a glimmer of immense strength. Demet Özdemir did not end her statement as a victim, but as the architect of her own future. Her emphasis on self-respect was the harbinger of a new era. From now on, I will make my life decisions not with fear, but with self-respect, she concluded. This is a powerful mantra. It suggests that in the past, her decisions, perhaps even the decision to stay silent for so long, were driven by the fear of losing him, or the fear of public scrutiny. Now, that fear has been replaced by a demand for dignity. I don't want any emotion to disrespect me, she asserted. By framing love as something that should elevate a person rather than diminish them, she reclaimed her agency. She wiped away her tears, thanked the journalists, and left the venue not as a woman scorned, but as a woman liberated. What remained of that night was not just the headlines, but the image of a woman taking ownership of her story, refusing to be a footnote in someone else's silence. And so, we are left with the question that hangs over the entire industry: is the story truly over? The world of celebrity gossip is a place of endless cycles, where breakups are often just pauses in a longer drama. But looking at Demet Özdemir last night, witnessing the clarity of her pain and the firmness of her stance, it feels different this time. Sometimes, the biggest breakups aren't announced with loud arguments or public wars. Sometimes, they happen with a simple, quiet realization that that's enough. Yaman's silence may be the period at the end of this sentence, or it may be the silence before a new storm. But for Demet Özdemir, the book seems to be closed, bound in self-respect, and placed on a shelf where it can no longer hurt her. We will continue to watch, to listen, and to analyze. Thank you for spending your valuable time with Anything You Want. If this deep dive into the psychology of this breakup resonated with you, please leave a comment. Do you think Yaman owes her a response? Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an update on this unfolding saga. And to our Join members, thank you for enabling us to tell the truth with the nuance it deserves. Until next time, remember that your self-respect is the only love story that lasts forever. Goodbye.